Okay, so what I've done in this particular case is I already created a new comp, and I also created 3 words on it. This time it says, wow, that's great. And if I press Command plus, I can sort of move them into whatever position I want them to be in here. Okay, so I'm going to add the keyframes, but before I do that, I want to think about where I want the objects to begin. What I want to do, just a refresher, what I want to do is change the position. I'm going to transform the position of the objects. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to activate if you expand the layer and get to the sublayers, we're looking for transform position. So that's what we're going to be changing. But I'm going to show you a really quick, so that's one way you can do it, a really quick, easy way to display that. If I hold down the Shift key, I can grab all of these layers together. If I press the letter P, it automatically only brings down, makes the position visible. So that way you don't have all the other stuff. A little bit of a trick. You can do the same thing with scale with an S, R for rotate. So it's pretty easy actually. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, before I even turn them on, I'm going to move these words into where I want them on the pasteboard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Shift key only because I think that's a little bit easier for me because it goes in the right direction. So I'm going to bring these, it kind of takes a while to get used to dragging stuff and not having it sort of deselect. It's kind of tricky. Okay, so now they're all in the position. So the first thing I want to do is I want the word wow to come in. So I want it to come down vertically. Okay, so I've activated the position, so now it creates a keyframe. You'll see that it creates a keyframe on the timeline. What I'm going to do is that's where it starts, and now I'm going to move the playhead to where I want it to end. So I can click and drag down. I'm just going to take kind of a guess, because this is all kind of an inexact science here. So maybe I want it to go a little bit faster. I could also, I could also tweak it later on. I want it to go really fast, maybe even a little bit faster. Okay, so that looks good. Okay, so the next one is the word that's. I want the word that's to come in after the word wow appears, and I want a little bit of time to pass. So I want it to go, wow, that's great. Okay, so I'm going to go forward a few frames, maybe even. And by the way that you read this is these are frames. So this is 5 frames, 10 frames, 15 frames, and you know that when we get up to 29, it becomes 1 second. So if you look at the 1 second over here, let me move this over, it says 100F. So it's basically 30 frames. It starts counting all over again. So maybe I want it to be a little bit more. So I'm going to go, I'm just taking a guess. Another way you can do it is I could just play it back and say, wow, that's, so around here I think I want it to come in. So on the word that's, I'm going to turn on the position. So that's my starting position, which is at 20 frames. Okay, and I'm going to move in the word that's. And I'll play it back just to see how it looks. Okay, so that looks okay, I think. Let me just try it one more time. Oops, gotta go all the way back. Okay, now you can see what I did wrong here is I didn't move it. So that's my first one. So what I'm going to do is so I know I want it to end up there. So I'm going to move it back. Okay, and now I'm going to move it forward a little bit. to my second keyframe. And I'm going to put it over there. So see, you can tell this is definitely not scripted. Okay, so that looks good. So now let me go to the second keyframe and then the first keyframe. There. This one is so quick though. I think it's a little too quick. Let's try it again. It's too long. So what's happening is there's too much space in between. So what I'm going to do with these two keyframes is I'm going to select them on the word that's and bring them forward a little bit so they're a little bit closer. Let's try 20 frames. That's even a little bit long. So what I did was I drew an invisible marquee around them. I think that's good. Wow, that's great. Okay. Now the next one, I'm going to add some keyframes. Notice that these are selected. There's a couple of different ways I can select these. I can hold down the Shift key and click on the keyframes, or I can draw like an invisible sort of marquee around it. So now I'm going to do the word great, and that's in the start position. So I'm going to turn on my, activate the position. I'm going to move the playhead forward a little bit. And on the second one, I'm going to move this into position. I just want to show you one thing though. I can also manually add a keyframe too. So if you wanted to just add the keyframes before you moved it, you could do that too. All right, see how it creates a keyframe over here? Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move this into position. And let me play it back and see how it looks. By the way, notice I'm using, in this case, the preview panel to do this. I'm using the preview panel because on a laptop you don't have the keypad, so you can't make use of the page up, page down, the N key, the beginning key, but what you can, and also I'm trying to, the zero, which on the keypad, which automatically plays the RAM preview. And as I explained on our first class, a RAM preview gives you a pure, exact playthrough of the timeline. Whereas if you press the space bar, it might not be exactly in real time. Right now we're working with very, very small files, so you can press the space bar. But you'll notice as in subsequent classes, as we get, as things become more complicated, you will have a problem and you're going to have to use the RAM preview. So anyway, now what I'm going to do, because I think this looks pretty good, well actually it doesn't look good, but let's pretend, is I'm going to import a sound file into this composition. And I can do it one of two ways. I can either get it off of my, drag and drop it from my timeline, from whatever folder it's in. And I can drop it into, remember the project window, which if you have a small screen, sometimes it sort of gets hidden. So let me try to, here it is. You can always, if a window is missing, you can find it in the window menu. So here's my project window. So let's say I want to bring my sound file, and I want to, feel like dragging and dropping, I can just drag and drop it in this way. And you'll see that it appears in the file, in here. The other way I'm just deleting it. The other way I can bring it in is I can select File, Import File, or Command I, and then I can just bring my Boom one in. By the way, notice that it's an AIF file. That is the format you have to use in this application. Even if an MP3 looks like it's working, it's really not. You'll notice in the project window, by the way, you can tell the difference between my compositions and my sound file. If we had created a solid color, you'll also see it there. I did that on another comp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the sound file into the timeline at the bottom. And I'm going to play it through with my space bar, and let's see what happens. Well, I don't hear anything. The thing with After Effects is unless you RAM preview it or you preview only the sound, you won't be able to hear the sound on the timeline. So for this, for those of you who are working on a laptop and using the preview window, if you use the RAM preview button on the preview, you should be able to hear the sound. And sure enough, you hear that weird sound when you do that. If you're working on a workstation, you can do the same thing with the RAM preview, except you can also use the dot, which looks like a period on the keypad, to also RAM preview the sound only. So this actually worked out pretty well, but let's say we wanted the sound to be a little bit lighter, or rather lighter meaning, you know, you want it to be a little less loud, the decibels. You want the audio to be a little loud. You can tell I'm doing this off the top of my head and not reading anything. Anyway, the way we can do that is just like with transform tools in the, transform properties in the layers. We can also display properties that we can transform with the sound by by expanding the little arrows to the left of the layer. So you'll notice here we have something called audio levels, which allows you to set the decibels. So let's say that I bring the decibels up and I preview it now. You'll notice at 12 decibels it gets kind of loud. So if I bring it back to 0, this would be the regular setting, which is probably okay. Another way that you can control the sound, let's say that you want it to fade in and out, which we will be doing in our next lesson, is you can do it visually by expanding the waveform sublayer, which gives you a graphic of what the waveform looks like. I'm going to zoom this up a little bit on the timeline using the little navigation element on the bottom. By the way, when you're working on a laptop, the screen real estate is it's not very much. So you can see, watch what happens when I scrub the decibels. Let's take a look and see what happens to the waveform. See how it goes up and down. So you can get an idea. And if I do this now, it'll probably break your eardrum. But this is at 12 decibels. I guess it's not too bad. And the other thing that happens when you're at really, really high decibel rate is you can begin to hear the noise in the background. It sounds sort of like a hissing. Hear that? You can hear it cut off. So certainly 0 decibels is probably fine. Yeah, it's a little bit of hissing, but I don't think it's going to bother anyone. Okay, so it's done and I'm going to save it. Now I am going to show you one other thing I would like you to practice, and you're probably going to have to write it down while you're doing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in a separate video clip. Basically, I'm going to show you how to export this little composition into a QuickTime file format. It's also called encoding. So what we're basically I'll explain it in the next one. So I'm going to quit out of this or end it now, and I'm going to do it in another little video clip. So stay tuned.